And tonight on PM Express, we are back at Akanka, eating deep into the moral fabric of this country. Corruption. As the Ghana Integrity Initiative is worried, Ghana is not making any progress on the Corruption Perception Index because the latest report shows Ghana has stagnated and received the same score as that of 2020. What exactly are we not doing right? Is it a problem of the people not wanting to get rid of this canker, or it's simply lack of political will to deal with the root causes? Let me share highlights of the latest GII report with you. Maybe we can get answers to these nagging questions. So what does the perception say? Ghana is ranked 73rd out of 180 countries. That's not all. The CPI score, Ghana scored 43 out of 100. Let's look at what this means. It means that Ghana failed to make progress in the fight against corruption in the year 2021, as the score of 43 is same as the country's 2020 score. So we made a comparison, from 2012 to 2021, and you can just see, as the graph is showing, from 2012, we were scoring higher marks, and the highest was in 2014. And then in 2015, we came 47, 2016, 43. And then up from 2017, we started declining. So in 2017, we scored 40. In 2018, 41, 2019, 41, 2020, 43, and 2021, we're still at 43. What are we not doing right? This is the breakdown of what the Ghana Integrity Initiative has put together. So John Mahama scored 3, he gained 3, and then he lost -5, balance of -2. Nanado gained 3 points, lost -3, and has 0 over there. And so this is these are the countries that were ranked. And if you look at the countries, you can see Seychelles, and you can see Botswana, Rwanda. Seychelles had 70. And where is Ghana? Ghana is scoring 9, with Seychelles scoring 1 over there. And you can see countries like South Africa even doing better than Ghana. You can see countries like Namibia doing better than Ghana, scoring 6 points. And the results by region, it's over there. Average regional scores with top and bottom performers in each region. This is what it looks like. The Americas average score, the top is 77 over 100, bottom Venezuela 15 over 100. And then you look at Eastern Europe and Central Asia, average score, you have the top being Georgia with 56 over 100, and bottom over there. And you can see Middle East and North Africa with average score of 39. Top being United Arab Emirates with 71 over 100, bottom Syria 14 over 100. Same for Western Europe and EU, where Denmark is topping and Bulgaria is down there. Sub-Saharan Africa average score, you have Seychelles topping, and then bottom you have Somalia. And Asia Pacific, New Zealand topping, and North Korea at the bottom. So this is how it looks like, the top countries and the bottom countries. So Denmark, New Zealand, Finland, Singapore, Sweden, Switzerland find themselves top up there. Bottom countries, Venezuela, Yemen, Syria, Somalia, South Sudan, finding themselves down there. Are we losing the battle against graft? My guest tonight for this discussion, Edem Senano, of course, is anti-corruption campaigner with the Citizen Movement Against Corruption. Mary Ada is Programs Manager, Ghana Integrity Initiative. Manasseh Azuria-Wini, who is investigative journalist and editor-in-chief of the Fourth Estate, and Vitus Azim, anti-corruption campaigner and former executive director, Ghana Integrity Initiative, will be joining us. We're also hoping that we'll get a member of the government team, the information minister, to join the conversation so we can understand what really our problem is. Let's delve deep into the issues after this break. Welcome back to PM Express, and we're looking at how Ghana is performing with our fight against corruption. I'm grateful that all of you have joined us. Let me start with you, Mary Ada, who is Programs Officer at the Ghana Integrity Initiative that has put together these findings. I want you to share with me some of the significant findings of this year's reports that you have just published. All right, so I think...
Good evening, Aisha, and good evening to your cherished viewers. I would also want to say good evening to my co-panelists who have joined on the Zoom, to my former boss specifically. Transparency International on an annual basis would share the CPI, as we all know. This year's results for Ghana indicates that we scored 43 again, just like we did in 2020. And this year's 43 is out of a total number of countries that is 180, as was last year too. Let me say that on the global scale, the evidence shows that most countries are stagnating when it comes to the calculation of the CPI scores. In the picture of Africa, if you look at the regional report, it says as much that more than 43 or so out of the total number of countries didn't even get the average score that was required. If you look at the global average, is 43, and the African average is 33. Looking at the African scores, if I may refer, you would realize that most of the countries that scored, apart from Seychelles, you come to up to Ghana, where we have 43, and Senegal. Most of the rest of Africa, that's 49 countries which made it into the score this year, did not get any score that is appreciable at all. And with the CPI, you say that when you attain a 50, then you realize that you are making some gains. Again, we say a country has made significant gains when you have been able to make an improvement of 3 numerical values increment, and you would have made a significant dip if you have gone back by 3 figures. And so you realize that since 2012, when the CPI scores became comparable, Ghana's score have zigzagged in a way. We have a higher score happening in 2014, where we attained a score of 48. And then we also had the highest dip in 2016, when we dropped from 47 to 43. So that's 4 significant points being lost. That has been our fight. And you realize that incrementally, we have made a negative dip of 2 from 2012 to 2021, the 10-year that we are referencing. We say 2012 because the CPI has been there since the 90s, but in 2012, the computation became comparable. And so we are doing, for a 10-year tenure, we believe that we can't do a trend analysis of the scores. And for that matter, this year's score have shown that. I heard you in your introduction mentioning the various scores that have happened. But then I just wanted to add that in Africa, you realize that in the previous years, Ghana used to even be somewhere around 6. Unfortunately, now we are going downwards. Countries that we used to perform better than are also making some significant gains. And again, if you look at the African picture, countries such as Botswana, which were making very significant strides, have also started retrogressing. And so the analysis shows that we are stagnating in our scores when it comes to the CPI. So I think that is the summary that I can't present for now. As we proceed, perhaps I could add more.
So what accounted mainly for our no movement?
All right, so let me take it back to how the CPI is computed. This is an index that is computed based on various surveys that have happened in country by experts, by academics, and by business people who do business with the country. And so you would find the various indices or surveys. Let me mention the World Bank Economic Forum analysis, mention the African Development Bank's analysis. We have a lot more. And for Ghana, we had 9 different indices making it for the CPI of 2021. The various indices compute different things, and the variables include issues around good governance, issues around accountability and independence of our state accountability and anti-corruption institutions, issues around frameworks and legislations that regulate the fight against corruption. We also have if our audit agencies are as independent and performing their duties as they should be. We have indicators for bribery as well, abuse of power, if our asset declaration regimes are as robust as they should be. And again, if we have a right to information legislation that is robust and is doing the work for which it's supposed to be. So if you look at these variables that go into the calculation of the various indices, then one is tempted to say that most of the indices, if we come to the issues around laws and regulations, if you look at the specific ones, you'll realize that we make very good gains in those surveys. But then when you come to issues around investigations, in the issues around sanctioning, prosecution, and also on sanctioning, you realize that we fall short in most of these areas. And then you also would agree with me that in cases where people are speaking to their interactions and engagement with the public sector, where they have had to either pay some amount to a public officer to influence process, then it's not surprising because the perception out there, when you do a public opinion survey, is very high. But these indices capture people who are doing businesses, people who know exactly what is happening. And so it's not surprising that some of these variables come short. And we all agree that in country, when we speak to what we want to do, we make the very fantastic regimes and frameworks and also our legislations. But when it comes to implementation, we are found wanting a little. We have all collectively as a society agreed that per our constitution that the state will put in place measures to eradicate corruption and abuse of power. Unfortunately, on a daily basis, the manifestations of abuse of power, which is one of the benchmarks and indicators for these surveys, is out there for all of us to see.
Adam Senano has joined us. Adam, what's your own assessment of the nation's fight against corruption, especially under this government, given our recent scores?
Well, unfortunately, we appear to have gotten into doldrums from the height of the euphoria of the 2016 political campaign fought on the back of anti-corruption, fought and won, I should say. And all the excitement of a special prosecutor's office. We are not just stagnant. We really are not serious about this fight. There's very little to show of prosecution and sanctions that will set the kind of precedents that will serve as a deterrent for anybody who is thinking about trying to steal some more millions from our coffers. And it's quite a disappointment because from the heights from which we came, honestly speaking, I was expecting that in terms of if it was a CPI, we should be some notches above 50, with the likes of Seychelles and the other continental, the Botswanas that are there, because we seem to have come into the 2016 space with a certain momentum, but we seem to have lost all that momentum. And the CPI obviously is telling us that we are not taking this fight seriously.
Manasseh Azure-Winnie, the best of, let me say the worst of John Mahama is now the best of President Akufo-Addo. What does this say about the fight against corruption under this government?
Well, it is not very pleasing to compare two failures, but we know what happened in 2016, and corruption was the main campaign issue for this current president. So it makes it very difficult not to remind him of the situation then, what he said at the time, and what has happened. And that is what makes it inevitable to look at the two scenarios. Otherwise, if you have people who have failed, 43% is a failure, and we've not crossed 50. So both have failed. And I often say that if we ever find something or indicators that would be able to measure corruption reality index, we would get to know that the reality is even worse than the perception. And this, or reports of this nature, often come to validate what the average Ghanaian has been thinking about or knows. That when it comes to the fight against corruption, I often say that this government or president has done so well with his lips. But when it comes to the actual action against corruption, this is one of the most friendliest administrations, friendly towards corruption, and a number of factors can be given. The earlier speakers mentioned the Office of the Special Prosecutor, which all of us greeted with euphoria. It ended up being not being what we thought. Martin Amidu, as people said, may have had its issues, but that still does not overrule the fact that the administration was not happy when he decided to work on this Ejapa thing. We know what happened to the most exceptional public servant who has waged an honest and genuine war against corruption in this country. And I'm talking about Daniel Yadomelevo, the Auditor General, who was forced out of office because he dared to touch certain untouchables in the administration. We know how the president goes about bragging that no member of his government has ever been investigated and found culpable. If anybody has evidence, they should bring it forward. But we all know that the country's or Ghana's health minister should not be in office if we were in any serious country or we had any leader who was serious about the fight against corruption. He appeared before Parliament, admitted breach the Procurement Act, not following what the Attorney General said about the vaccine contracts and all of that. That vaccine was being sold $10 a dose, but we were paying almost twice the dose through a very shady business intermediary in United Arab Emirates. These same people that the MPP, whilst in administration, had cause to criticize and call fraud and all manner of names because they were involved in a merit deal. So every Ghanaian was expecting the president to at least ask Kwekwe Jimamenu to step aside. But what did he do? He went to the MPs or ministers' constituency and was joking about it. So if corruption has been reduced to a joke, then the whole nation is joking about this fight. And Aisha, if you care to know, we at the Fourth Estate analyzed the Akufo-Addo statements, and we realized that in 2021, he delivered 2 States of the Nation addresses, one in January, another in March. And in both States of the Nation addresses, there was no mention of the word corruption. And this was the first time in 13 years since the word corruption, graft, or its synonyms failed to feature in the president's statement. And the reason is not difficult to find. He's so guilty, and I think the word corruption is now too heavy for him to mention. And that would be for anybody who has any sense of shame. You should be ashamed as a president to mention corruption or your fight against it if these are the realities on the ground.
Manasseh, let's look at the Office of the Special Prosecutor that you talk about. Has it executed its mandate? I mean, you say that it was greeted with euphoria. We're all happy when we heard about the Special Prosecutor's Office. We heard about Martin Amidu and his tenure. Now there's another Special Prosecutor. Let's look at the office in whole. Has it lived up to purpose?
Well, when Martin Amidu was appointed Special Prosecutor, I wrote an article praising President Akufo-Addo. That article is still online, titled "The Craziest Presidential Appointment." And I praised the president, but I said one thing, that the appointment of Martin Amidu wouldn't bring or yield any results in the fight against corruption if the presidency wasn't committed to the fight. Because I've lived in this country long enough to know the power the executive wills, and then the kind of spooks or the influence it has to muddy the waters for any public officer it doesn't want to succeed. Eventually, there were accusations here and there, and Martin Amidu resigned. The current Special Prosecutor inherited an empty office. According to him, only one member of the team, or only had one person on the payroll. And so he needed to build staff. As of Martin Amidu's time, there were plans to recruit at least 250 people. This office now, according to the new Special Prosecutor, needs a number of things, a forensic lab, a call center, and a number of things to even set up. That huge building is almost empty. The recurring expenditure and some of the fixed expenditure that are supposed to take place, according to him, would cost, or they would need about 1.2 billion cedis to be able to do this work. But the government allocated 80 million cedis. And when Martin Amidu resigned, we're told that in his time, the budget allocated for his office was to the tune of over 250 million or so. So as the years go by, and as inflation sets in and others, one would expect that if this Special Prosecutor wouldn't get all the money at all, we should by now be heading towards a budget of about 500,000. But he's getting only, 500 million, but he's getting only 80 million, about 6% of what he demanded. So if all of these are happening, we can't be sure that the office would be able to do what is expected to do. I know, and if anybody has cared to look at some of the very complex investigations across the world, the FIFA investigations, the Hush Puppy investigations, and others, you would realize that sometimes it needs a lot of sophistication to be able to track some of these online fraudulent expenditures that go across borders. So if we are not able to resource the Office of the Special Prosecutor, if we are even giving him a third or a quarter, and perhaps decided to stagger some of the amounts because we are in economic hardships, then one would understand that at least there's some level of commitment. But if 3 or so years ago you were prepared to give close to 300 million, and now that you've handed an empty office, a very huge story building that needs to be filled with human beings, directories, machines, departments, vehicles, and all of that, you've now slashed that amount to 80 million cedis, then one would say that the fight against corruption, as far as that office is concerned, is not being taken seriously. But we would still expect that even with these limitations, there are some low-hanging fruits which the Special Prosecutor may need to take seriously at least Ghanaians should be able to have some restoration of hope in that office. And then together we can fight for the needed resources that that office needs. But if you ask me whether or not the office of the special prosecutor has lived up to its mandate, everybody who knows about that office would know that as long as, or as far as what happened in Martiamidu's era is concerned, the only work that was done at the time was the assessment report of Ejapa. And this special prosecutor has taken over, and we are yet to see the actual work done. So I cannot say that it has lived, it has done what it was set up to do because of what we have seen so far.
Mr. Vitus Azim, what's your own candid assessment of our fight against corruption, especially as we're seeing this report? We are maintaining the same position we were in 2020. All right, so we lost Vitus Azim there. Let me bring back Edem Senanu. Are we putting so much emphasis on the perception than reality? Because, I mean, what people may perceive may not be the reality.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to do a little, probably, public service education. Perception-based indexes. The word perception there is not the English language perception, which means it could just be a vague impression that an individual has without a concrete basis. Perception-based indexes are statistical tools that have been found to be scientifically grounded for predictive analysis. I have used it in my master's work, and it's used in insurance and in banking to predict how people will behave to the extent that they can charge you a premium. So, for example, predictive analysis, perception-based indexes have been used in the UK and elsewhere to find out that people who buy, let's say, red cars are more likely to crash those cars. If you buy a car, you spray it red, they will charge you a little extra in terms of the insurance system because they know the statistics show that you are more likely to have an accident than another group. So they've been found to be statistically relevant through regression analysis and purposeful for predicting the behavior of people. So it is a reality analysis. That's the point I want to underscore. Perception-based indexes are not just indexes made from vague ideas or notions people have that will not happen. They are scientific, they have rigor, and they are used for prediction. So to that extent, if the CPI is telling you that this is what is happening, let's take it very seriously. I'm sure that answers the question. This is the reality. It is not because it's called a perception-based index, so people have a certain vague assumption. Maybe don't have a strong command of the scientific understanding of the tool. But the tool gives you a predictive position, which is very close to actual behavior because they have done averages on it. So let's not get it confused. That is reality for us.
Mary, what are some of the practical ways? Because now that we've seen the report, we need to look at the practical ways in which we can actually improve on this kind of perception index. What recommendations have you made in that report?
Thank you very much, Aisha. I believe I just wanted to clarify something before or add on to something Manasseh said. With the CPI, what Transparency International would not want to do is to compare tenures as to whether this government is doing better than the other. The analysis is for us to make progress as a country. And as we continue to say that governments are continuums, and so as we go from year to year, and perhaps let's also pick the analysis from this angle that the data would sometimes be a 12 to 24-month period data. Then if you want to be comparing too much on which government did better than the other, we would sometimes be making some analysis which would not be grounded in fact. If you want to talk about particularly which government did better and which didn't do better. We are not doing that. I don't want to do that, but we decided to do the 10-year thing to show that in the 10 years of Ghana fighting corruption since 2012 to 2021, we have made a -2 gain, meaning we have dipped by 2. If you take the analysis to look at who did better, in which year did we perform better, we should want to say that rather. In 2014, we scored 48, and that is as close as the 50 mark we got to for any particular year. But then if you look at from 2014 to 2016, we made a dip of 5. So it means that in our struggle, we have lost more here than we have ever lost. And we are now trying to come back. Perhaps you can infer from some of the things we have done over the past 4 or 5 years. The Special Office of the Special Prosecutor, the passage of the RTI law is another law that most of the indices, the Democracy Index, the World Bank, 2 indices that are computed, speak to the issues around the audits, independence of our audits, and around our asset declaration regime and efforts we are making to change things. You would realize that these inform the score. So I just wanted to bring that on board and say that practically, Transparency International believes that we need to do some things and we need to ensure that they are done quickly. One of those things that has happened over the past 2 years or thereabout is when the issue of the contracts for sale came up. The way Shraj took the complaint from Manasseh and from the Ghana Integrity Initiative up and investigated and made recommendations, based on which recommendations the president had no other option than to take a certain route. And you see, that is how we should go about it. The independent accountability institutions, per their mandates in the Constitution, should act like that, and not because they are appointed and could be disappointed by the president. Then in most of the time, executive power would influence some of the actions that they pick or that they take in their work. You would realize that as we speak, even for us, the Ghana Integrity Initiative, in the report we complain to Shraj, we still do not have the report. And some of these fuel perceptions of the lack of independence of the accountability institutions to perform their mandates. And if we have that happening, it is good. Investigations, sanctioning. And let's say that we want to see sanctioning from 2 angles, that sanctioning in the sphere of adjudication and then the pronouncement of judgments, then sanctions followed. But then there are sanctions which are low-hanging fruits that we can be making some gains on. And we remember that corruption to a large extent in Ghana is done at the service delivery avenues, or those points where citizens are demanding services or go to procure services. If we are procuring and paying bribes and people are reported, investigations conducted at that level, and sanctions are meted out, then this will serve as deterrence, and this would influence future behavior of peers in such institutions. Again, we recommend that.
Go ahead.
Aisha,
Go ahead, Mary.
Again, we recommend that the education we have carried out as citizens, as the media, as civil society, has not been effective as we would have wished. We need to do more, because the moral fiber, the values of our society are being degraded and they degenerate on a daily basis. Our attitude towards wealth, our expectations of public office holders is just, I don't know how to say it, but it's just abnormal. In some spaces, we know that public office is for service. But in our case, we believe that when we go to public office, we are supposed to use those offices to then promote the agenda of ourselves, our families, and our peers. And when we do that, and our citizens as well are fueling those perceptions, when we do that, then we continue to push our public office holders to do certain or conduct themselves in a certain way, which is detrimental to the progress we want to see in the fight against corruption. We need to hold power to account. And we can only hold power to account when we have the necessary information, when citizens are equipped, when we have avenues to report corruption, and when we have trust in the system that when we report corruption, activating the Whistleblower Act, we will be protected.
Mr. Matasazem, is there enough accountability from the part of government to the people in terms of how we are fighting corruption as a country?
I wouldn't say that there is enough accountability. You see, people think that accountability is just when there's an allegation on air, and you get a minister or somebody to come, a party communicator, to come and try to explain. Sometimes some of these, they don't even know the issues involved. If there's an accusation against an individual minister or an individual government official, then somebody, a party communicator, comes to say, no, it's not true, it hasn't happened. Without giving us the facts. You need to give us the facts in defense of the person that the allegations have been made against. Otherwise, that's not accountability. Second thing is that when there are issues raised and you are an accountable government, especially if they expect you to take a certain action, the citizens are looking up to you to take an action. Let me just give an example. For example, the complaints about the president hiring commercial aircraft on his international trips. That's happened about 4 times. If he was accountable to the people, one would have expected him to suspend that thing. Especially when you can lend our aircraft, our presidential aircraft, to other presidents. If it is not enough, if it's not adequate for your travel, how can it be adequate for other presidents' travels? And they don't risk, they don't care about their lives. So when you're talking about whether we are accountable or not, it's not just coming on air to try to justify what actions you have taken, but also giving us the facts and also actually stopping some of the things that the citizens are complaining about.
Let me take a break on PM Express. When I return, we'll be looking at how to move on from here. I mean, we've scored 43 in 2020. We're still 43rd in 2021. Now, you look at all the other African countries, some of them who are performing better. They used to be below us. They are now above us. Why are we here? Why are we not fighting corruption? Is it the fact that the people themselves do not want corruption to end, or is it a matter of lack of political will? When I return, we'll find answers. Stay with me. Welcome back to PM Express. We're discussing the corruption index published by the GII. And my guest on this show, Mary Ada, is with GII, Manasseh Azori-Awuni, Adam Senanu, and Vitas Azim are all anti-corruption campaigners. Let me start with you, Manasseh. What role can the Ghanaian public collectively play to actually put politicians on their toe and truly make corruption a high-risk endeavor?
I think Ghanaians should be able to, first of all, understand how corruption affects them, because corruption and its fights have been left to a few people. And if the average person knows how corruption affects them, then they should be in a position to say no to it, report it, and perhaps not take part in it. Last week, Wednesday, I had the experience of rushing a sick person to the Tetekwashi Memorial Hospital on the mountains, Mampong, Ikrape Mampong. And this was somebody who had a stomach upset. It was quite serious. And while the infusion or drip or whatever they call it was on him, he decided to visit the washroom. And he entered and realized that there was no toilet paper. So I went to the nurses and asked, my friend wants to visit the washroom, but there's no toilet paper. And the response was that we don't give toilet paper. And this was close to midnight. All the shops around were closed. And the only luck we had was that there was a woman who came with her own toilet paper. Perhaps she frequented the place and she knew how the situation was, so she came prepared. But if we hadn't met this woman, and a commodity as cheap and as essential as toilet paper cannot be found in a hospital, then one can imagine what else cannot be found. Even the emergency place, they had an emergency ward of a sort. Where my friend was asked to lie, there was no bed sheet. And so when he left, another woman came and also asked to go and lie on that same bed without a bed sheet. So one can imagine the infections that one could get just by visiting this health facility. And facilities of this nature are the norm in the public sector, not an exception. So if something as basic and as essential as healthcare, the average person cannot go to the hospital and be treated with dignity. We know, I grew up in Ketekrachi, and I know that the schools there, some of them are not under trees, but schools under trees are better than a lot of them. So if Ghanaians are able to appreciate the fact that the country we live in is not too poor to provide these basic services, but the main problem is that somebody somewhere is hijacking the resources that are meant for all of us, building mansions and stashing some of them in very foreign accounts that some may even die and their relatives may not know about. If we all know about these things, then for once, we will put NDC MPP behind us so that when someone is accused of corruption, we should rally round whoever is doing the prosecution. If even your president or your government or your party is in power, we should give them the support, because a lot of the time you find people within the government, you find influential chiefs who call politicians, and even the president say, oh, Mr. President, this one is my son, this is my daughter, I'll deal with it. All of these are things that do not augur well for the fight against corruption. So the first thing Ghanaians should realize is that every single one of us is a potential victim of corruption. If you have enough money to be able to go to the best hospital, we know what happened when PV Obeng collapsed. PV Obeng collapsed on the Spintex Road. The president at the time said he had instructed doctors and medics at the 37 military hospital to look for him and treat him. But the taxi driver who took him decided to go in search of a health facility nearby. So even if you have the money to travel outside to go to the good hospital or whatever, a time may come when you'd have no control over your situation. And if there were better facilities, health or otherwise around, he might have been saved. And this could happen to anybody.
Mr. Vitus Azim, has there ever been the political will to actually fight corruption in this country? Do we still have... Yes.
What we just hear is political campaign rallies where they promise that they will fight corruption. And even some of them are described as incorruptible. But let them get our votes. They forget that they made those promises. And when I say there's no commitment, you just look at some of the examples. Let's say resources. When Madam Bidu was a special prosecutor, he had these complaints. The current one has come with the same complaints. Even he has no board of directors. So he cannot even recruit the key personnel that he wants. But you are here, when you go to his office, there are at least 10 soldiers guiding the place. Who takes care of those soldiers who come there? Are they investigators? Are they prosecutors? And that's not the only accountability institution we're talking about. There are complaints about inadequate resource. Yoko has changed executive directors about 3 or 4 times in the last five or so years. Mr. Domolovo was pushed out when he was helping the government to recover money illegally paid or taken away. So when you look at all that, you cannot say that there has been any political commitment in the fight against corruption. But what Manasseh has also said means that you see, corruption is hydra-headed. If we have given up looking at the politicians to help us deal with corruption, we as citizens must do something about it. And sometimes we just say politicians, but the public servants themselves. The example Manasseh gave about the hospital, there was no politician sitting there. What are the nurses and the doctors doing with the monies they charge? At least something common like Tolero. So if we give up on the politicians, then the citizens themselves might come in and also play a role.
Mr. Senano, what should be the strategy going forward? Because definitely we all admit that we're performing poorly and we need to do something definitely about this.
Thank you. 2 things that have been noticed through research on the jurisdictions that are doing well, the Finlands, the Norways, the New Zealands, apart from the fact that they have female presidents, that must add something to the equation, is the fact that they intentionally worked at developing a culture of hard work, integrity, and honesty. What that means is that inculcated into the educational content and the case studies and models are a system where you glorify known personalities, and even if it's fiction or even if it's film, there is the glorification of individuals who through dint of hard work have risen through their ranks and through prudence have managed resources and have made it. Intentionally, whether it's radio skits, whether it's drama, whether it's music, whether you do that so you feed the generation that is growing up with a certain understanding of what life should be. And when they grow up, when they're at the national level, that is what they're going to reflect. And so that's one of the things we need to do. How do we make sure that our curricula strategically and intentionally embraces the issue of anti-corruption, picks on individuals, make sure that the stories we are telling, the film, the music, is pushing a certain agenda that builds a generation that understands this is the way to go. I think that that's a space where the religious organizations and bodies can play a good role as well. So far, we have failed. Let's agree that the church and what have you have failed at making sure that we have inculcated those values that then drive the nation in a particular direction. The second thing noticeable about these jurisdictions is the fact that they have strengthened independent organizations of state that are totally independent and are able to provide the checks and balances required to hold in rein the excesses of executive or any other branch of government. Now, what that means is if you take Ghana, our constitutional arrangement makes the executive appoint all the key persons in the so-called independent organizations. And once the presidency is doing that, there's a certain kind of association, relationship, and people seem to think that, oh, let's not push or hold the government too strongly accountable, etc. It requires constitutional change in Ghana. We need to make sure that it is only people with the competencies, the objectivity, the experience, and that these independent institutions of state, whether it's the Yokos or Trajes or whatever have you, are totally and properly independent, so that they can hold accountable the other institutions of state. So those are 2 things that we ought to be looking at critically.
Definitely, it's something we'll be watching out, because definitely we need to up our game. And if there are countries that were doing lower than us who are now improving and we are still where we are, we should be worried as a country. I'm grateful, gentlemen and lady, for your time. Edem Senano, Manasseh Azuri, Vitus Azema, anti-corruption campaigners, Mary Ada is Programs Officer with the GII. My name is Aisha Ibrahim. Enjoy the rest of our program.